So if you're saying that people in your office are saying similar things, would it benefit for me to have that conversation? Same conversation I had today.
Joe Mulligan and Bob Azar, the director and deputy director.
All right. Maybe we can facilitate that.
Yeah, we did a drive through earlier today and just like talking about development. And jobs. That kind of thing, you know.
I don't really see it happening on its own. I think it's gonna need a kick in the city.
Yeah. For sure. Are there certain spots where there's not even? Where there's certain, so is it the whole?
We drove around for, I don't know, half hour,
Yeah.
looked at a couple of different locations. I'd be happy to do that with you.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna text Sean to see if he's coming. He just emailed me like a little while ago saying he was gonna be. So maybe he's just, okay, we can wait. That was a really good picture of you. I feel that yesterday. I had a nice, stupid, excited face on. That's great. So good. I came in this morning, Joe was like, I expected the high from yesterday morning to not be quite so high after eating last night. I was like, no, just a little bit. What meeting did you have last night? Last night's meeting about the UNESCO ticket relay project that we're really under the yeah. I saw it, thought it looked better. Yeah. I saw a picture of you,
It was in demand.
Yeah, oh yeah, he was out and about. Oh yeah. Okay, I was like, I can't imagine doing this in like hundreds of cities. No, keeping track of like all the projects. I was like, if I like people like me and Sarah, like all of these talking points is. I was impressed that you learned how to say non-construction. I was very impressed by that. Oh, that's great. Yeah, he was like, well, you're at the non-construction group, you know, and I was like,
It's impressive that he remembers what state he's in.
yeah. We are like, oh, for the record, I was impressed that Mayor Pete knows how to do that. He did his homework. Should we get started with outshot to be mindful of time? How close we are?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Video.
Yeah, we have forums, so we get started. Let me know when we're ready. Okay, let's bring this to order. Can clerk, please take the roll.
Chair Andy Block.
I am here.
Vice Chair Fabian.
Here.
Lieutenant William Brown.
Here.
Marissa Lopes is absent. Rachel Peterson. I'm here. Peter Camara.
Here.
Thomas Badway is absent. Sarah Engel. Here. Jessica Lance. Here. Me Ursa.
Here.
Sean Raymond is absent. Rosie Jaswell is absent. We have 8 present and 4 absent. We have a quorum.
Okay, great. Let's get started. I am so excited for today's conversation. I'm going to give 2 quick reminders before we get started. One is if you'd like to give public comment at the end or at any point, if you could sign in a sign-in sheet so that we have your name for the record, that would be super helpful. The second is just as a reminder for folks, we have fewer members of the public than normal, which is totally fine. But just to say, when we do presentations, we normally do questions around the table first, and then we don't do public comment till the end, but we do like questions and stuff. So if there's questions about the presentations and stuff, like feel free to raise your hand and I will totally call on you. And the third, those were the main 2 things. I also want to acknowledge that we are joined by the city solicitor's office. Thank you so much. Our fantastic clerk as always. And Kyle from the city council's director of all the things. I don't know what your actual title is, but Kyle is the best person in City Hall, so. You're the best here. What is your actual title, Kyle?
Director of Project Management for Providence.
So I think that those are, yeah. So let's get started. Can we please read the first item into the record?
Updates since the last meeting.
Awesome. I have a quick update and then we can go around the table for other updates. Actually, I'll give two because Sean's not here. One is at the last meeting, we announced that the city council and mayor jointly adopted something called Vision Zero, which commits us to a plan for zero traffic fatalities or major injuries by 2030. That resolution calls for an intergovernmental task force to do that planning work together, and we met for the first time today. So the process is kicked off. We're moving forward. Happy to keep this group abreast of that. That's just like a ad hoc working group. That's not a big public meeting or anything, but I can let folks know as that moves forward. And then the second, since Sean's not here, I'll just give his quick update, which is we've talked a lot here about the RIDOT Road Safety Assessment, or RSA. And he has gone ahead and scheduled that RSA. You should have all received an invitation to attend that. And that is my reminder to make sure public property also gets that invitation, because they are going to join as well. And so you should have that in your calendars. If you don't, give me a heads up. I can send it to you if you want to join, if you didn't get it. Yes. But really excited about that, and maybe Sean, when he gets there, can give us an update on location and things like that. But otherwise, we'll make sure to get that information out prior to it happening, so you have information about what it is and what you should plan for. Hope you can join. Obviously, it's in the day, so it's a little harder for some folks. So no, join if you can, not if you can. And we, Vice Chair Jamie and I got together and we are planning the dates out for May, June, and July. And so we'll be sharing those dates with you soon once we get them scheduled with the clerk's office. So those are my updates. Does anyone else have any updates pertinent that they'd like to share before we move to the presentations?
Do you want to talk briefly about the changes with lighting as a sort of?
Yeah, hello, Marissa. Good, how are you? Come on in. Okay, we are now joined by Marissa. We can reflect that for the attendance. Yeah, so after the last meeting, we had the great presentation on lighting. Kyle and I met with public property. They've immediately increased the lighting percentage on North Main of all the lights. There's like not a literal dial, but they've worked with the consultant to turn it up. I think it's like 85%. I forgot, I'm looking at you. Yeah, I think it's like 85%. If you go all the way up to 100, it's like the lights burn out pretty fast. So so they're trying it out. It is noticeable. I've noticed the change in lights, and then Kyle and I are working with them on some other, like we walked them through Jamie's awesome presentation, and we're working with them on a few other follow-up items. So we are following up on the recommendations from the last meeting. The director of public property said that he will likely join us for some of our future meetings because he'd like to be involved in this going forward. He was not available today, but I did see him at the Vision Zero meeting, so he is engaged. He's excited to be working on safety issues with all of us. Thank you. Any other updates?
I can throw something out there. Just since the last meeting in February, as far as our activity, there were 31 accidents, 2 with injuries. One of which though was actually, it didn't make the news, but I let you guys know about it. Is the cyclist that almost killed himself coming down the hill. Went right into the road. But so for enforcement activity, 484 summonses. I think the number last time was 690, so that's a total of almost 1,200. I know the Journal did a story about it.
Yeah.
Their numbers were, I don't know what about that. Some of the violations go to municipal court, so maybe that's why there's a differentiation, and some of them go to traffic tribunal. It depends on what the offense is for. Some of them we could do either court. It just depends. Primary focus has been speeding, but they're, listen, they're finding other stuff. They're finding window tint, red light violations, unregistered cars, stuff like that. These guys have actually done it a couple of times. I think that's pretty much all I was going to talk about.
Okay, thank you. And for the record, I'd just like to note that Sean, oh, no worries. Okay, great. Why don't we move to the presentation from Ripta? Oh, actually, please read item number 2 into the record.
Presentation and discussion on RIPTA investments, presentation by Sarah Engel.
Awesome, and I want to note that, we have a presentation from Rivka. You have a handout, it's also gonna be on the screen, for folks who are on Zoom, it's also available on the portal, but it'll be on the screen in a moment. But I do need to enter this as an exhibit, so can I please have a motion to enter this as exhibit 1?
I'll make a motion to enter this as exhibit 1.
Excellent, thank you, Jess, do we have a second? Excellent, second for Marissa, all in favor?
Okay.
Excellent, great, Sarah, take it away.
All right, I'm gonna tag team, by which I mean mostly just hand this off to my colleague Zachary Agish. But just a quick piece of background, the investment in large part that we're going to talk about is a planning effort that we're about to kick off for future investment in the North Main Street corridor and beyond. We're going to be exploring the potential for bus rapid transit and or light rail on this corridor. And the recommendation to explore that comes from Rhode Island's Transit Master Plan that was adopted by State Planning Council in December of 2020. That followed a 2-year planning process dating back to mid 2018 that looked at the entire state. RIDOT, RIPTA, and statewide planning collaborated on this and looked at rail, bus, and other modes, but primarily rail and bus. Current status, market for needs for future investments, type of investments, and resulted in a pretty exhaustive compendium of recommendations for the entire state, with sort of more suburban and rural type interventions recommended for the suburban and rural parts of the state, and more traditional fixed route transit for the urban part of the state, especially frequent service, including a frequent transit network covering the entire city and the surrounding adjacent cities. And we've been able to do a little bit of implementation so far. It's a 20-year plan, so it is not expected to all be done overnight. And some of the recommendations do require additional incremental planning to get to the finish line or to the starting gate if you're talking about a construction project. So this is Zachary Agish over here, and I don't know, should he
have to
stand or what?
Well,
What's the best way to do it?
Who's going to be
I'll sit at the.
Are you or he going to?
I think he's gonna do it. Okay, right? You want to advance your own slides?
Yeah, that would be probably.
Okay.
I'll make it work.
Thank you for joining us, Zachary.
Oh,
Zach is also, in case anyone has any questions about capital planning generally at RIPTA, fleet planning, and it may be most relevant to this group, transit signal priority. He's our expert in that. Sean Raymond cringes every time I say it, but and to me that it's fitting that you're sitting side by side today, but that's not really what we're wanting to focus on. But that's we really want to talk about the planning, sort of future vision for the corridor.
Thank you. Good evening. Sarah said I'm Zachary Agish. I've been working just about 5.5 years now. Started just as the TMP was getting into its critical stage of defining kind of the initial recommendations. And since then, I've been working on implementation of it and wide certain projects. The one that I'm going to describe to you tonight is one that I spent a considerable amount of time between research, fundraising, discussions with a number of peer agencies across the country to really hone in on one of the major elements of the TMP, and one that is regionally significant as stated by our state planning council. So I will give you guys a little more of an insight. So as Sarah mentioned, this is a key recommendation of the Transit Corridor 2040 plan. It's made up of 5 There we go. The TMP is made up of 5 initiatives, many of which involve service improvements, frequency spans, bus stop improvements, ease of use, better signage, more comfortable and safe bus stops, etc. But in particular, this initiative, high capacity transit, really is focusing on the areas with the greatest potential for transit demand and usership over the long term. And we decided that in order to really identify and figure out where we wanted to take this particular initiative, we wanted to really study this in depth. And so, thanks to a very generous $900,000 raise grant, raise being the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity program brought forth by the bipartisan infrastructure law, we were one of the very few agencies in that first round to receive a planning grant. We were one of only 2 to actually receive corridor planning, so being our peer agency in Utah. And thanks also to the IIJA, when we originally had put in this grant, we were only going to focus on one of the 2 corridors that I will show in a moment, which was really from Central Falls to Providence. But with extra funding from the law, we were able to really expand this to look at both corridors as recommended in the TMP, and to look at some possible other scenarios that I'll describe momentarily. And so the study that we're going to be performing is an alternatives analysis. And the basic definition of that is, although the TMP has defined corridors, as you'll see in the maps, you'll see kind of an alignment. That doesn't necessarily mean that that is the definitive alignment that we would actually. The FTA is very specific about transit capital projects when it comes to corridors. We have to actually go through a robust public engagement process and a data-driven effort. And so we will be engaging with not just residents and businesses and many folks in Providence, but also in the other communities that span these corridors, including Pawtucket, Central Falls, Warwick, Cranston, and now due to additional funding, we will also be conversing with folks in Cumberland as well. And so the ultimate goal after this effort, which at this juncture right now will take about 16 months, is we want to arrive at a locally preferred alternative, which is data-driven, that is deemed realistic, that is deemed acceptable by the community, that is vetted by the community, that is endorsed by the relevant elected officials at state and local level. And if we consider it to be a project, we can then use these alternatives and put it forward to the FTA through their capital investment grant program, the single largest source of capital funding on an annual basis. As of this year, that is worth $4 billion.
Oh, wow.
And it is imperative, given the nature of this program, where dozens of agencies every year submit to this program, it is better to start now than to wait later, because as Sarah mentioned, it is a multi-phase process. Starting with project development, going through the evaluation process, going through engineering design work, vetting with FTA, and then ultimately, if it makes it through that whole process, an actual capital project. So the alternatives analysis is trying to accomplish as much of the development process as we can and scoping a project that we can all agree upon. So, project team. As the TMP was developed by RIPTA, RIDOC, and Say What Fine, we will form the core oversight group, given that. So we are the transit operator. We recognize that the DOT has certain stakes when it comes to North Main Street, being one particular element that we're going to be looking at as part of the study. We recognize that Say What Fine, being our state MPO, they also have a role to play in terms of state guide plan, our involvement in the long-range transportation plan, and how that fits with the larger state STIP program. That said, we also recognize that we have to work with all of you in Providence, and Warwick, and Cranston, and Central Falls, Cumberland. And we're going to be working with the planning departments, the DPWs in those communities, and also engage with all the residents in these communities as well. And so they will be part of the technical team that we'll be interacting with on a regular basis. And for those who are wondering who we'll be working with on this project, because it is a very large project, we officially, as of yesterday, finally executed our notice to proceed with Nelson Nygaard, who will be serving as our prime consultant, and they will be joined by a very diverse team of consultants, subcontractors, including WSP, who will be doing a lot of the engineering analysis for us. Connect the Dots, who I'm actually really excited to bring on board. They are a really good public engagement group. So they'll be working with us on surveying, helping us really dig into public engagement with communities and businesses, including some that we can't necessarily outreach ourselves. We're bringing CP planning in, RKG, who will be doing analysis for us, ASG, who has worked with RIPTA on numerous occasions on many projects. And then one element that we made very clear in our scope of work is that a project of this magnitude requires us to really look at the equity impacts and really engaging with communities who do live in historically disadvantaged communities or in areas of persistent poverty. And so we have included Rivera Consulting out of Boston, who specializes in outreach to these communities, and will be working with us to develop a framework. So if we do proceed with a project, we have a vetted and understanding of how we will mitigate and work with those communities to make sure that they benefit from our projects, whether that's through housing improvements, whether that's through project benefits that come through that. So they will be instrumental as part of this effort, because if we're going to invest in a project at scale, all communities must be heard and should be involved. So the corridors. There are two in the TMP that we'll recommend. If you ever look at the TMP map, they are known as, well, they have numbers, but they actually have names now. N12, which is the Central Falls of CCR Ward. This is considered to be the main transit spine in the TMP, really linking the entire metropolitan area from north to south. And it's this 15-mile segment where we think it could either be light rail or bus rapid transit. But because of these rules, we can't definitively state what mode that is. And so part of this analysis is to really figure out what is the mode that we will use. The other corridor, which we've added to this project given the IHA, we're also going to look at NA, which is downtown Providence to TF Green Airport. This is the one where we think it's BRT, but given the constraints on some parts of the roadway, there might be certain assortments of what may be implemented, but we have to analyze it for the same level of detail that we would for the other one. That one's the Now, when I say light rail and BRT, these are both by FTA standards, high capacity transit, and they're the most predominantly deployed large scale transit projects in the country right now, outside of heavy. And these are the ones that the FTA specifically really focuses in on for the CIG. So light rail is urban service rail. So you've been to Boston, not the underground portion of Greenland, but if you've been in the outer suburbs, pretty much that. Fixed track. It can be in mixed traffic. It can be a dedicated right of way. This is where in North Main Street, it's important for us to understand what that means in the right of way. Obviously, there are many different people needing to use that segment of roadway, let alone any of the other segments we're going to look at. Bus rapid transit can be a little bit different. It's bus. So, you know, the R line and our impact would be deemed BRT line. It's not fixed guideway, it's in mixed traffic, but it has some of the features of BRT being dedicated stops, it has a lot of the informational impact. But for BRT, it can be in mixed traffic or it can be in dedicated right away or a mixture. And so we're going to look through that as we look at those particular corridors. Now, alignments. Like I said, these lines are merely recommendations on the map. They're not definitive. They could be anywhere else on this map based on our conversations, based on our analysis. So in terms of particularly when we're looking at these lines right now, north of downtown, one of the first questions we're really to figure out is, where does it end? When we put it on the map, we thought it would end in Central Falls, because it's a very dense 1 mile over mile city. But we've heard that there's a lot of development opportunities in Valley Falls and Cumberland. So we're going to see, is it worthwhile to extending it just a little bit further north? Where do we stop where it is? We also want to look at where north of downtown, where we put these stops for whether it be BRT or LRT. There are certain stop distances. What does that mean for access to riders today based on where the R line is now? What does that mean in terms of placement and design of stops? And ultimately, how we're going to line it. South of downtown, same thing. We want to make sure that TF Green still is the right turns. Stop locations are in details. But one thing that we do want to look at a little bit is there a value in connecting the two corridors together at the same? Because TF Green and CCRI are not really that far apart. But there are obviously challenges in doing it, and so we want to understand, is that extra investment worth it? Would it actually generate more ridership, and would it actually bring that? So we will be looking at it. Once we have gone through this analysis process, and I should stress that alternatives analysis is not just strictly go right on in. It starts with a universe of concepts, then it goes through a screening process. It goes through several tiers of evaluation based on criteria that we as a community will collectively agree upon. We will eventually arrive at a draft local preferred alternative that we want to really hone in on. We feel pretty confident that this could be a project. So we will be refining that alternative, or those alternatives, to really get a better sense of what are the costs involved to actually deliver and operate such projects. What is the environmental classification that we have to investigate? Because in all kinds of projects, all infrastructure projects, there are environmental permitting procedure. And while we will do a high level screening as part of the analysis, there are limitations in the program through ways that we can actually explore things. We can't do full environmental review, but we can at least document and know what we need to really hone in on a proper NEPA process. We want to have a better sense of what are the possible land use changes that need to be taken into account. Because in high capacity transit, there needs to be the ridership to justify the project. And I know the city is going through the comprehensive plan effort. I had a chance to look at the growth map that recently came out. I know other communities are going through their comprehensive plan efforts. But land use is one of the criteria that FTA does look at when they rate projects. So we want to refine our LPA and just understand what policies may have to be discussed. We also want to look at what are the economic development possibilities as well, because again, they're business effective, there are ways to improve that. And ultimately, as with all infrastructure projects, how are we going to fund it? And so project of this scale and magnitude, it's important for us to really get a sense of what are the options at the table. We can collectively have that discussion as a community, as a region. So, timeline. As I said, we just gave notice to proceed to our consultant yesterday. We are planning to do a formal project kickoff next month. There's some internal conversations with Southern Data and our consultants just to make sure that everything's all set. But Sarah will have more information on that proposed. I suspect by the end of this summer, we'll be able to really get into the alternatives process. There will be some public engagement activities prior to the start of that effort. So there'll be a lot more information soon now. And assuming that we stick to timeline, we should be in a position to have a draft of a local preferred alternative by upcoming summer. With the expectation of completing the alternative analysis and having an LPA for a final deliberation, final approval, whatever process that may entail, in the summer of 25.
Zachary, when did you say the public engagement?
Public engagement is going to occur throughout the entire project. So it's not like there's only going to be 4 meetings and that's it. It's going to be very robust. There will be opportunities. So if people want us to literally come to a meeting that they're holding, I will make myself available to be there. But there will be pop-up sessions, there will be focus groups, there will be stakeholder meetings, there will be general public meetings, there'll be open houses, there'll be virtual opportunities. There's going to be a whole public involvement plan that we are working with our consultants on that will be available for people to see. And so if we do get through this alternatives analysis and we get to summer 25, we think there is a project that we are collectively as a region ready to move forward with. That is when we would make a decision to proceed on requesting entry into the capital investment grant program. But we would only do that if we know that we have a project, because FTA doesn't like it when you enter back out.
Who makes that decision? Is that RIPTA, or is that RIPTA only if there's like letters from every town? Like what's the, like what is like all the towns but one, like Pawtucket, it's like, nah, we don't want this, like, can it still move forward?
So part of the alternative analysis scope that we've asked our consultants is we are looking at a phasing strategy. So if we find out that, you know, maybe only the northern part of the curve, maybe it's only Providence to Central Falls, maybe that's the only part that people are really comfortable with dealing with. Right? We can proceed as that as a project. We'll have that noted as much.
I would, correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, I think more than a letter, ideally, we would be looking at, resolution of the governing bodies. I mean, pretty high level of commitment. Yeah.
Yes, correct. We have to furnish actual adopted resolution to FTA saying that this alignment has been accepted by the city. And it would be the same thing, we would go to state planning council asking them to accept it, because it is a regionally significant project. The NPO has to also.
Awesome.
But I'm speaking way ahead of myself. We still have 16 months to go. So we got a lot of data to crunch.
Yeah, we got a lot of things to think about. But all questions are good at this point. I mean, we'll answer as best we can. Is that the full presentation?
Other than the question, other than the slides saying questions and my telephone number that you're welcome to tell me. And I also have my business card too. So
Thank you, Zach. This is awesome. And Sarah. It looks like Nate has a question.
You're looking at alternative routes, alternative modes. Are you gonna take into account maybe looking at what might be the safest route in terms of, you're gonna be probably interacting with other users, right?
correct. So as we do our design work, we are going to be doing conceptual design. So I know during the North Main Street revitalization study, I know Jess and your team had done a number of possible configurations of roadway. Our WSP will be working on this and that. So we're going to understand what the pros and cons of different configurations of roadway, how do we make, particularly for stops, like I'm thinking North Main in my head, like if the stop was in the middle of the roadway, obviously we have to make it safe for the person to get from either side. So,
I'm thinking about, even before you get a design, the selection of them.
it's this all
Yeah.
clinkers through the entire analysis process. Like safety is a category we're not going to look at. So.
And to Nate's point, just to say, like, so the city has formally also adopted the Vision Zero, Vision Zero. I don't know what word I was going for afterwards. So that would be a really important part of the design too. Sarah,
Yeah, typically in an alternatives analysis, you look at multiple corridors. I mean, it depends on the context. In some projects, there are more potentially viable options to choose from than others. So that's really to say, if for whatever reason it turns out that North Main Street itself is not the best option for routing the downtown, northward leg of this service, other alternatives would be looked at, and different factors, and safety could be one of the factors for making that decision. Obviously, in the transit master plan, the sort of early presumption was that North Main Street already has the R line, that would be the spot, but that's part of the whole objective of the alternatives analysis, is really to look at multiple alternatives. And yes, safety would be a factor along with lots of other things, including like, is the right of way, is there enough right of way width? Is there a lot of things to look at?
Jess.
So, at the end of this whole process, the final deliverable, how deep into design does that get? Is it like conceptual level
So
design? Is it further?
under our scope in consultation with FTA, the maximum we can go up to is 15%. But that would be enough for us to at least agree on what is the space allocation of roadway along the entire length. It allows us to have a decent enough cost level to start really getting into a proper design activity. And that's why FTA has these phases, right? Is they want to initially break the project, then they want you to continue developing it, then they're going to rate you again, then you're going to go to design, they're going to rate you again. FTA's process is at least 3 to 5 years. So this isn't going to be like we apply and we're going to have money in a year.
That level of conceptual design also would include like tentative stop or station locations.
Okay.
Marissa.
I just want,
or Jess.
no, go ahead.
Just a quick question, and I know I wasn't at the last one, so I don't know if you addressed it, so this looks good, and it looks like it's gonna be more than 20 years out, because I'm thinking of the road all the way to Cumberland both ways, and I see that it's very narrow. But did we talk about what Rich is gonna do now? Because I've been driving North Main Street, and I'm looking at stop sign, where the bus stops and stuff are. Are you just gonna talk about that today? Like, is Richter willing to put up new stops now Like, what's the plan to help with making North Main Street safer for the pedestrians now and getting on the bus now?
So what I think top of mind for us generally outside the context of this particular conversation, with regard to the R line, is that the bus stops themselves, the shelters, the seating, the amenities, all of that, are not in an ideal condition and they need to be reinvested in. And we are beginning to look at budgeting for that. Everything beyond that, needs to be a partnership between, all the stakeholders. And I think that's a conversation that we can sort of begin to have here with RIDOT and the city in the room. If there is a need for, because we don't have control over where a crosswalk goes, where striping goes, where those things go.
Right, but I'm talking
We
about
have
the
not
distance.
done a study of each of those bus stops to determine, is it safe? Is it unsafe? What would it take to make it more safe? That is not something that we typically, it's a level of, we are very keenly interested in making sure that as many as possible of our bus stops have a sidewalk. If you go around the state, there are many bus stops that don't even have a sidewalk that serves them. And so we have 3,500 bus stops network wide, and we're looking at safety improvements for all of them. The R line is our highest ridership, most frequent, top level service. So, the improvement of those stops, definitely important. I'm gonna let you finish asking your question because I think you have more to say.
So what I'm talking about is like the distance in between. So before, it was like every other block was a bus stop, and it didn't have to be a whole big shelter, but at least a spot where the buses would stop to pick people up. Because I've known in the past, if you wasn't at a stop, that bus kept moving.
So stop spacing.
Right.
Yeah, so with a high capacity transit service, when we moved from having a kind of a more traditional, just a bus route. And we upgraded the service and added the frequency to bring it to sort of the rapid level of service. The standard best practice in transit is, and quite frankly, and again, Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, when you move up to a bus rapid transit or a light rail type service, you're actually going to push the spacing even further. As you move from something that's more like a local bus stop to something that's more like a station. And it has to do with a walk shed for a service that comes every 30 minutes to an hour versus the walk shed for a service that comes every 5, 10, 15 minutes. So is it likely that we would move the bus stops, redesign the spacing of the stops to put them closer together? It honestly is not that likely. If that's the question.
But the question's for the bus, not the train, because that's way out.
I'm talking about the bus today. It is not likely that we would be adding stops on the other line.
The one thing I will also add to Sarah's point is that, the reason the R line has the spacing that it does is that it allows us to add not only the headways for the service frequency, but it also allows us to ensure that the reliability of that service is consistent. And I get it, sometimes there are buses that may become a ghost now and again. I see that, but the closer the stops are, the more times the bus stops. And every time the bus stops, there's dwell time. Every time the bus dwells, means we're adding more hours of running time to the service. And so the R line is kind of at this kind of threading the needle of what is a local bus and what is a BRT. It's essentially a BRT light is probably the best term I can give it.
How much space is in between stops now? Sorry.
So the R line is typically, well, I'll use this as a baseline. So in this case, it's typically a half mile
Between
stops. It could be up to a mile, depending on the month. R line stops are a little bit closer together. There's a little bit more stoppage. You're probably looking at about 3 to 4 stops every mile for the R line. And that's already really close to not fitting BRT definition.
Okay.
And because of how the R line is funded, because we do have CMAQ funding to support the operation, if we were to change how that's designed, it could impact the funding source.
Okay.
But I do recognize your point.
But only because people were interested in more people riding the bus, and they're not gonna ride it if I have to go down a hill, let's walk a half mile this way or a mile that way. What are we talking about? It's not realistic. So, just so that when we're looking at making it safer now, we know what our options are here. You know, that's why I brought it up. But thank you.
Yes, yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Lisa. Jess, did you still have a?
I lost it.
Oh, no.
It's fine. I know how to.
You know.
Boss.
Lieutenant Brown, did you buy it?
No, but he said it's enough.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you over Peter.
I actually got a couple, and I'm not picking on this project, because I really, I don't mind the first time you just throw at me.
And can you say your name for the record?
Sure, it's Mike English. First, I got a question, and how fast will the rail track go?
So this, again, this is dependent upon
It's all-
how many stops and how far. Relatively, you're probably looking about 25 to 30 miles at peak.
Now, the tracks are just like a regular
Yeah,
rail track.
regular standard gauge.
Who plows it, and how does it get plowed?
We would be getting equipment to do that. Then that's part of that operational and capital cost understanding of if we were to do that option, we as Ripta need to understand what is the equipment necessary as part of that. So
But would it stop the cops from going from North Main Street up to the east side? Because those tracks are now in between, do we gotta wait for your guys to tow, plow, or does the city be able to plow the streets that are the side streets that are going in?
what I will say is that
Pictures show the rail is right at ground level, and some of these you can do right in the same roadway path, like vehicles and the train can share the same roadway, I mean.
Right.
It would be the traditional train tracks.
The dragging of the tracks and the dangers of what it.
No, it wouldn't be like Amtrak type of thing.
Oh, yeah, it would be like the bumpy, like an.
I was thinking about.
No,
Oh, yeah, they're like-
Ground, and when it hits that track, it might yank it up, right across.
I think that's like far enough, like this is still in the planning.
let's make sure we get to a project. So we have a project. So, but we will look at that as part of our capital, what equipment we would have to consider.
Then the other thing that I had was. Because of the track and because like the officer said, there'll be tracks kind of in the ground. If a biker were to go over, would it be like the one in North Main Street where the old tracks are, where if you get your tires stuck into it, you are flying? Cause
So-
I took that truck, it's a beautiful truck.
So fixed skyway transit means separated from the rest of traffic. So if we have tracks in the middle of North Main Street, we will be putting fences to separate us from automobiles.
Right, but if I'm going from, say, and I'm just from North Main and I'm going on a 45-degree angle, the bikers do whatever they want sometimes. And it's right where the fence ends because your car's gotta go up the hill. And you go across and you just have enough angle to grab it in. Is it still gonna suit it or is it gonna fit?
What I would say is part of our conceptual work with alternatives, this is why we're looking at the right of way to understand how does this all fit and looking at desire lines of cyclists, of pedestrians. Because I know and I've read the news that people do, to your point, will take the quickest way and sometimes that is 45 degrees.
What happened? One last thing. Why would you even think about going to tier 3 when tier 3 already has MBTA? You're creating the wheel twice.
So I want to state for the record for folks here, RIPTA does not have anything to do with the commuter rail.
No, I get that.
RIDOT does. MBTA has its own schedule. It only runs on weekdays. It only runs 10 trips during Monday through Friday. I cannot attest at any point that there may be additional service that goes down there at any point in the next 20 years. So we have to remember that the modes that we're talking about are focused primarily on the metropolitan area. MBTA is really focused at the regional level. And, again, if the MBTA were to decide to increase service at a later date, we'll take that into consideration.
Now, how does these things go back and forth? Is it one track that twirls around from back, or is the front like the back? It's just one unit going straight across.
Actually, before he answers that, can I want to tag on to that last question
Yeah.
because everything that Zach just said is very true. They really commuter rail, Amtrak, RIPTA all serve. In almost every case, we serve very similar routes. We connect many of the same points, but that's the whole concept of a multimodal network. And it's the granularity of the service, really. So the more you have as a commuter or as a person trying to get from point A to point B, the more you have options, in general, the better that is. And even better so if in the future you have, fair integration. If the one option doesn't fit your schedule, but you have a multi-pass that covers multiple modes, you can hop on the next bus or next train or whatever. And just to have those options is real freedom for people that doesn't exist as much now. And again, the span and the frequency will vary. I think significantly, into the future. So the next question, and sorry, I lost the.
Well, if you go,
Yeah.
like Naples, Florida, they had a train that they only went one way, right? That's the end. It left there and it's still there today, it's a museum. They didn't think about how it's coming back, so just curious, and now they're coming back.
Again, I will start, this is all part of the alternatives analysis of, if we have a terminus, what does that terminus have to look like for your point of turning around? What does it mean for maintenance facilities? Obviously, we're not storing this at our own facility, we're gonna have to find a second location for these vehicles, whether it's BRT or, well, BRT is fine, but we're gonna look at maintenance facilities as part of that.
Yeah, because I was thinking that you're gonna land it CCRI and then store them there. And then therefore.
I will assure you that it's not a one track line at all.
Yeah.
This would be
Yeah, I was just
five-year.
wondering, the students going up there with the car, and how much room would it take? And would you bring on the students itself?
No, and that's why I'm excited about this whole planning effort to talk through all the potentials, and as Sarah, as you were talking, I was really excited about. So I think some people that before this, I was in the Bay Area, and we had that same kind of like multimodal connections where there was some overlap, but it meant that you had the freedom to get around in so many different ways. And like even getting from, San Jose, which is closer to where I live, up to San Francisco, you could hop on. They had like the light rail in San Jose like this, but you could then hop on the commuter rail, which connected to the BART and the Muni and all the different things. And because there were so much great overlap, you could get around without a car. And so for 6 years, I almost never took the car because you could just go 40 miles and connect in all the different ways, which was amazing and not yet possible here. But these are great questions. And I think like through this long planning process, a lot of that will be discussed and revealed. And if there are concerns, that'll all be part of this, it seems like. And so that's great. And there's so many places around the country who have great systems that mirror some of this. So lots to learn from other places. Do other folks around the table have questions too, or comments? I think this is really exciting is my comment of like, thinking about what could be coming next, either if it's more regular, more buses or potentially a light rail to get people around. Seems really exciting.
Councilwoman,
Oh, of course, Val.
just a clarification.
And Val, can you say your name for the record?
Yeah, I'm Val Reichert, Morris Avenue, Providence. I signed the comments list over on the table.
Oh, yeah, there'll be time for public comment.
About
This is about
this,
questions.
About
Yeah,
this, that should come at the end of your agenda, right?
yeah, if you have questions now, that's
No,
awesome.
I just said, why don't you guys have comments?
Oh.
Something to look forward to then.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Did you remember yours?
Oh, yeah. Jamie and then Jeff.
I get really excited about light rail, just I think because for completely irrational reasons. And I think a lot of people who aren't in the habit of riding the bus are like a lot more comfortable jumping on light rail for reasons that again that aren't rational. But I wonder, is there like analysis that points to like if you're going to serve the same corridor at the same frequency, like does light rail tend to have higher ridership because of perception? Is that sort of like a formula for that?
That's interesting.
I wouldn't say necessary formula. I think what you're touching upon is definitely perception, and some of that requires just ongoing education and working on a progressive behavior change process of incentivizing people to use the network today and hopefully in the future. I think the important piece to note here is that when we're talking about BRT versus RT, or even in a no build scenario, or even just an increased frequency of service, maybe it's a 5-minute bus service, what it ends up being, who knows, we're gonna go through the process. A lot of this has to do with travel demand and travel origins and destinations, because we're gonna be looking at, all right, if you were to board in, say, St. Falls, where is the likelihood of you using the network and where are you gonna end up? Are you going to go to a location in Warren? would you transfer to a local bus? Like, we need to understand the flows, because if we find out ridership is more or less the same as where it is today, then we need to have that conversation. Does that mean there are policy decisions that we have to make to justify the projects that we're talking about? And so that's what this process to help have that dialogue is community. But I understand, like, you're not the first one to bring this to my attention.
And yeah, maybe in the same vein of like bus versus light rail, I imagine light rail is much more expensive to put in place because you've got to lay a bunch of track. Is it like cheaper to operate? That like once the infrastructure is in, or is the operational cost for light rail versus bus comparable?
So part of so in the alternative analysis, we are going to look at what the operating cost is going to look like over, the lifespan of the service. Traditionally, transportation costs are pretty fixed for us in the bus world. It's the labor cost and fuel. And then everything else to run transportation really just becomes rounding errors. Like it's about preventive maintenance, that's rounding error. So yeah, it's either BRT or LRT is going to cost more in a capital sense. That's a given. Operating, it may not be all that different. It depends on the alignment. It depends on how we build out the potential schedules. We are going to do a schedule analysis as part of it. Maybe it's more cost effective to increase the frequency. Because right now we're saying, oh, it's every 10 minutes. Maybe it's more cost effective if it's every 5. We'll figure it out as we go along.
Yeah, there's gonna be, I think, a very robust debate about that.
Sure.
About all sorts of things, but that's gonna be a really interesting one to see, and we definitely are gonna have to. We did cost estimates when we did the transit master plan. They're very much out of date, and we're gonna have to do them with more specific information that we're gonna get through this process. So I think it's gonna be really fun to engage with folks and sort of have everyone put on the table like what they like about one versus the other, and sort of look at some scenarios and kind of work through that.
We'll be answering a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good conversation.
And will the opportunities for public engagement, how can we keep it up to date with what's going on and plug folks in, since our line is so important to North Main? How can we learn about all the opportunities to engage?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we are going to be doing a very robust process throughout the entire 16-month study. We are actually in the process of updating a project website right now, just to serve as a temporary thing until we actually get our consultants on board and start kind of getting the beginnings of what the framework of that product engagement would be. Absolutely, as we have draft documentation ready for review, as we have final documents review, as we have maps, they will all be on that website. As I mentioned, I'm going to be doing a lot of the outreach along with the consulting team. So if there are public events, if you have events in your ward or other wards that may be affected by the quarter, I will definitely make myself available to be at them. We'll be doing pop-ups, we'll be doing outreach to nonprofit groups. We will have a lot more information available for this group and for a lot of others in the next month or so.
Oh, great.
Including what that involvement plan looks like. And if there are things that we don't include, I do want to hear what you may think might be affected as well. So
There's definitely going to be an opportunity to sign up for emails or whatever to get pings as an individual whenever something is coming up. We also can build it into the updates for these meetings.
Oh, that'd be great.
On a monthly basis.
Yeah.
Like I can say, here's what's coming up this month, or
Yeah.
and the project website will have, there's always going to be a calendar, and if there are taking public comment, you'll be able to do it that way, but also you'll be able to sign up for updates.
Okay.
And we'll just make sure to come prepared, month by month.
Very, very good. Did I see a question?
Yeah, I have a good question.
Can you say your name for there? Oh, you just did.
Yeah, sorry, Kate Randall, Doyle Path, Providence. Is the idea that this would replace the R line or work in conjunction with the existing R line?
So the TMP recommendation would be that this would replace the northern part of the.
Okay.
Because by frequency as recommended, they're at the same level. It would be, unless there's a justification to have an overlaying bus route on top of this,
Okay,
you know, we, as part of our alternatives, we can have a better sense of what that would be. But I would say at this juncture, I would not expect that, but there could be a justification.
so there wouldn't necessarily be like a transitioning the R line to be kind of more of a local bus, increasing kind of frequency of stops in conjunction with something like more traditional bus rapid transit or light rail.
So. That is something,
Great question.
it's a great question, one we will have to look at. In a BRT scenario, especially if you're just getting North Main and it's kind of in that fixed skyway. Once a bus is kind of there, it doesn't leave that corridor because it's getting the priority, the expectation that it has. Certainly an open question to have as we go through our data, maybe there is justification, even if it's just, you know, a local bus service, even if it's every half hour to fill in a gap. But again, you know, if this mode, you know, as we say right now, is 10 minutes, maybe there is justification that you're fine. In case the overlying bus service
Would be
way being overkill and may have better use of those resources in another part of the network. So definitely part of that conversation.
Yeah, the recommendation, for whatever this becomes would be that it would be at least as frequent as the R line currently is, if not more so. There, I don't personally imagine getting behind a proposal that had a less frequent service. I think that would be counterproductive. And as a tourist, I've been to some places where there was a shiny new streetcar that had such terrible headways that I would just walk instead. Like I've waited, I've freely to death in Kansas City for the streetcar to come and to heck with it. Like I do not want to go to one of those. I don't want my name attached to a project like that. So I'm going to be fighting for something that has a better frequency, not a.
Cincinnati is the same.
Okay. So.
I did not talk about this stuff. Yes.
Question related to the last question, and I guess also your question, about, yeah, like frequency and spacing of stops. Like if we went to a model of an every 5-minute bus, would it be possible to have like an A and B bus and same spacing of stops, but stagger them so that you can get on the bus that stops where you want?
I
Is that
would,
not
so
really done?
I will give you a high level answer because I don't work on the scheduling side of our department, but I will tell you from the experience I'm aware of. Adding variants of like A and B makes it really hard to schedule. And it may necessarily mean that from a deployment of vehicle, if you say A stops every 3 stops and B stops at the other 3, we try and schedule buses in shorts and longs, which is like, I'll use the one as an example.
Yeah.
A long for the one would be the whole one from South Attleboro all the way down to TF3. Short would be just Pawtucket to the Shaw Supermarket and Warren. Our scheduling folks would prefer to try and keep something really clean just for scheduling of labor and vehicles. But, you know, again, we're trying to answer as many questions. You know, we can look at it. I'm not opposed to looking at options.
Relatedly, the RIPTA budget is being heard tonight by the General Assembly, and they could use a lot more money, is something I'm just gonna say. To be able to do all the amazing things that we're asking of them, even right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions for RIPTA?
There's something crazy.
Awesome. Okay, well, one, Zach, thank you for joining us. This was so amazing. And Sarah, thank you for bringing this to us. And I'm really excited about what could be coming and the future of North being here and the backbone of this plan. And maybe actually before we move to our next presentation, since Val does have comments specific to this, why don't we do any comments people have about this? And then we'll do comments again at the end. But Val, did you want to share your comments?
Hi, I'm Val Reichstadt, North Providence. I'm wildly enthusiastic about bus rapid transit because it's been part of my life. For the last 4 years that I lived in Cleveland, Ohio, I was on bus rapid transit daily. And it was part of my transition from being a car-centric person to the car-free person you see before you today. So bus rapid transit features that influenced my mode shift out of the car the most were fair, free boarding. You pay your fare before you get on board the bus rapid transit in Cleveland. And you don't have to stop and pay the fare to the driver. Another feature that made this a thing that I just couldn't resist and had to use it all the time was all door boarding. So when it would stop, everybody got on immediately and didn't have to pay the fare, and the thing took off just a minute after it had pulled into the stop. So it really, really was rapid. Another feature that was indispensable was that it was dedicated lane. And that was the center lane, the left lane, not the right lane. And this is crazy, I know, Rhode Islanders are gonna be like, but you have to be able to make left-hand turns. Car traffic could still make left-hand turns with signaling from the red lights that told them that they could make a left turn at a particular time when the bus lane was stopped. Crashes didn't occur because it was very clear who got the green left turn and who did. And the buses knew when to stop when the car traffic was turning left. So the left-hand turn still occurred on Euclid Avenue where I live, but that dedicated lane and signal prioritization meant I could get from downtown to 5 miles out to Cape Western Reserve University in no time, guys, in no time. It was truly a rapid transit experience. Sadly, it turned back into a stop at the curb again bus after Cape Western Reserve University on the rest of its trip eastward. And it turned into really not a bus rapid transit at all, more like the R line instead. So, but bus rapid transit ridership was through the roof. Everybody wanted to ride that train because it was really, really rapid, especially the people who were at universities that were close to the rapid transit line. This seems like Rhode Island. Going from Providence to Warwick through Cranston, and you have to go to places like Department of Motor Vehicles, where you're doing your car registration without having your car. I know it sounds crazy, but there really are a lot of trips you can make on bus rapid transit that you would normally make with your car, but people will opt for this because it's not as sexy as I know, but it's really, really a great option, and it probably can be a good option. Thank you for letting me wax enthusiastic.
Thank you, Val. Did anyone else have a comment specifically? Yeah, Patricia, can you say your name for the record?
Patricia Robb, chair of RI Transit Riders, and I'm really excited about this plan. We helped with input on the national transit master plan, and it's taken forever to get it really off the ground. This is a very major part of the plan, and we're ready to help out in any way we can.
Thanks, Patricia. Any other comments particular to the RIPTA presentation? Okay, great. Thank you. This was amazing. And if folks didn't join our James Walk last year on North Main, Zach was awesome and had so much amazing information about North Main Street. And so just want to give him a shout out for that too. Thank you guys. Awesome. Let's move to our next presentation. First, we please read item 3 into the record.
Presentation and discussion on police data and speeding. Presentation by Lieutenant Gordon Brown.
Awesome. Thank you, Lieutenant Brown. And you have a special guest.
I do.
I'll let you introduce.
I do. So, yeah, and I think they don't have to stand up if they want to, but after the last meeting, I talked about a couple of things, right? And how the people in the traffic office are really into this. They do a better job taking accident reports, so on and so forth. And you had some questions about the data. So, Jose Deschamps and Trent Hastings are actually, they're all things traffic with the police department. They both, they are the motorcycle unit. Actually, they're both action reconstructionists. They both do commercial enforcement, and they handle the speed sleds and variable mesh forms that they're actually called. So they compiled some data starting, I think this started right around the first of the year. They moved the sleds around in both directions, north and southbound at 4, I think there's 4 different data points here. And you can look through the compliance and risk stuff, I'll just go to the first page. It starts with data like that, breaks it down by hour of the day, total number of vehicles, and it labels things compliant with the speed limit. Low risk, which I believe is 0 to 10 over the limit. Medium is 10 to 20, and 20 plus would be the red area and high risk. And then you flip through to like the third or fourth page, it gives you some nice little charts. The first one, I'm not gonna go through every page, that would just be ridiculous, but the 677 North Main, at Pleasant Street, I mean, you can see the overwhelming majority of the vehicle traffic is either, for this location, compliant or low risk. There's very minimal stuff that's high risk or even medium. The one location that stood out to me was further up by the Shell station, 1052 North Main Street. We've been kind of focusing our efforts on that, which is a little surprising. And even for this, I don't know what page number it is. I still have some medium risk. That's up by the Shell station. What's that? Yeah, so that stretch is kind of, if they have the green light coming south at the Walgreens, it makes sense
Oh,
that.
it's by the Walgreens? Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Shell Station, okay.
This is the 1052 North Main report?
Yeah, and this one is, the one that I stood out the most was the southbound direction. I think there was 2 of them. In any event, the overwhelming majority of the data kind of support what we're talking about, right? There's that small number of traffic that's traveling at a much greater speed and is likely presenting the hazards that we're talking about, and that most of you in this room see every day. Besides what the data is, there's another section that I don't think we needed to even have printed out. But along with each location, it gives you this enforcement priorities report. And as Trent was explaining to me earlier, it really just kind of looks where we should be directing our efforts. Like I mentioned earlier, we're up to almost 1,200 summonses so far on the corridor. I've gotten a little bit of feedback from a couple of business owners that they like the visibility. It clearly hasn't solved the problem. We're still writing 130, 140 tickets a week. I don't have much else to present other than letting you look through data. Does anybody have questions of Trent and Jose about how we're getting the data, what we're doing with it? I know I should say just before the meeting, myself and Trent talked to James, and he's looking to try to get access to the actual raw data. Do you want to explain how these things work? Because I was misconstrued too. Like I thought we downloaded the data and we did it in-house, but it's all cloud-based. You're welcome to take the floor.
Yeah, please step on up.
Good evening.
Claire, do you need me to?
Yes.
Oh, here you go.
My name is Trent Hastings, 20-year veteran of the town of Creek County. Hastings, Hastings. We get our data from all traffic solutions, and we pay for a cloud. So all the data that we get from the Bureau of report is stored in the cloud, and it's a program that all traffic solutions is designed for us to print out these reports. However, after having a brief conversation prior to this meeting, I'm going to try to extract the raw data from all traffic solutions so that better suit your committee, and we can have a better understanding of what your needs are and how we can combat the issues that we're having.
Awesome.
So, is there any specific questions with the medical much whether I can answer, but that's an overview of what they do and all that?
Yeah, Marissa.
Well, it's not to that, but
Oh,
I just had a quick question. So you're saying the area that you concern is over near where the Armory and Shell gas station is?
Well, out of the data that we collected, when I was looking through it, it looks like that was the worst in terms of the medium risk, if you will. But every one of these locations had some element of clearly showing people aren't following the speed limit, right? Every location had some of that. I mean, the overwhelming majority of the traffic is either compliant or low risk. You can look at some of this yourself and.
Yeah, I was just looking for it. I just wanted to know, where are the accidents where the people, the pedestrians are getting hit? Is it near Shell gas to have
So,
data?
When I looked at the last month's data from the last meeting, I did this yesterday. I looked at all the methods. We report traffic accidents in different categories, so it's kind of a pain to research it. You gotta look at accident, pedestrian, serious injury, So I compiled that North Main at Randall, that Doyle, that intersection is hands down the worst. North Main and Rochambeau has been a problem, for a long time as well, and we've talked about that in here. And I would say that's probably the worst in that stretch.
Do you have that
Is
crash?
it all accidents or pedestrians?
What's that?
Is it all accidents or pedestrians?
So in the last 30 days, or since the last meeting, there were 31 accidents in the corridor that makes up this task force, and 4 of them, at least 4 or 5 were North Main and Doyle. North Main and Randall, but I don't know what the contributing factors are. I'm assuming it's probably people not stopping for the signal, but I don't know.
I just asked because I'm trying to figure out, like, I don't take the bus, I don't walk enough Main Street, I'm a driver. But I've been down there just looking to see, so when we start to talk about where things need to be,
Yeah,
will we focus more on those areas versus
Well-
areas that may be a little dangerous, but pedestrians aren't getting hurt, just so that we utilize funds.
These 2 guys generally are involved in all the serious accidents. 1 or 2 of them is usually there. I know the 3 that we've highlighted from last year. One was North Main, right at 670 North Main, I think, or North Main and Pleasant. One was at North Main and Rochambeau, and the other one was that also near North Main and Doyle? Yeah, that intersection is it's just crazy, cars from multiple directions, and you know what else it seems like? If you're on North Main, the signal takes so long to cycle to come back to you. I can definitely see why people who do that daily making an effort to try to zip through it.
Yeah.
and something that, oh, sorry, just real quick, something that I know Michael has brought up before is some of these intersections also where people are speeding. There isn't necessarily a crosswalk currently, and so it could be that people are speeding and maybe they would like to cross there to get to some of these businesses, but aren't currently doing that, and might if there were some infrastructure to slow things down. And so maybe some of these aren't issue areas, but could be in the future as like economic development growth if we don't address them.
Right.
Like, so it's like, both like where are the hot spots now, but like, where could they be as we're like, you know, building out business there and stuff.
One
So-
thing I would say is that I
I
wish I knew that,
I'm-
well, I'm gonna bring something up that relates to you. I wish I knew that the light presentation that you were doing last month was completely, like, I wish I knew how in depth you were gonna be, because I talked to Jose about that right after.
Oh, yeah, we
well,
sent that data to public properties so they could deal with the stuff we shared.
But one of the things he pointed out, and as soon as I started talking about it, Jose said this right to me, he's like, lighting is one of the biggest issues. Every time they're out there dealing with one of these things, that you just tell the lighting. And I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Good evening, thanks for having me. Jose Deschamps, DES, CH, AMPS. I'm a 29-year vet with the Providence Police Department. One of the biggest things that I see, especially on the last pedestrian front that we had, that was a fatality that I helped investigate at Rochambeau and North Main, is like, it is horrible. The lighting is too dark. People really can't even see some of the crosswalks that need to be repainted.
Yeah.
We definitely need more signage. I know that, I've heard the phrase, signage pollution. I disagree with that statement. We need more signage for pedestrians to understand as well that they need to use a crosswalk. Coming off a bus and not walking 20 steps to the crosswalk is extremely dangerous. We all know that parking your vehicle and then getting right out of the vehicle and crossing from right where you are is very convenient, but it is also very dangerous. We at the Providence Police Department and through DOT, thank God, are able to do traffic enforcement. But we really don't want to hit the constituents, the residents, with constant fines.
Yeah.
To me, that's not the only way to educate.
Yeah.
We should be getting out more flyers, more signage on billboards, more maybe even community interaction where we're actually out there on the beat or on the street, just talking to people.
Yeah.
And letting them know these are the things you need to do to make things safe. Yes, there is speeding on North Main Street. There is speeding throughout the entire city of Providence, let alone the state of Rhode Island. What is speeding though? Is it 2 miles an hour? Is it 5 miles an hour? Is it the maximum, above 15, 20 miles an hour of the actual speed limit? Of course. But unless we have education coupled with enforcement, we're not, to me, in my experience, you're not getting anywhere, and you're not getting through your constituents. They're just not getting the message. The more you hit them in the pocketbook, they're gonna blame you as a council person or as a person that's on the board, and they're gonna remember that $86 fine that I just got whacked for, that $95 fine minimum for conditions referring to reduced speed. And if you hit them with a speeding ticket at, X amount of dollars over, every mile over, that's astronomical for some people within our community. They just can't afford it. They're barely affording their registration and insurance. So if you take anything away from what I'm saying, more education, more patience to give our community and our constituents time to understand and realize the things that are going on. We need way more public push to say, let's do this and let's do it the right way.
Well, Jamie's and Rachel.
Yeah, and I have so many thoughts, but maybe I'll, but I wanted to, to your question about the locations. I think looking at the last year, fatal crashes is statistically such a small sample size that that's not a good way of assessing overall risk. But I want to remind everybody that Providence Streets Coalition has 13 years worth of pedestrian and cyclist crash data on a map on our website that anybody can look at, and that will show you over time everywhere where people are being hit by cars. And I think that's a better way to sort of say where are the hot spots, is kind of looking at like the longer range. Yeah, maybe I'll stop there for now. I'm more confident, but let's.
Okay. Rachel?
Yeah, so I have a couple comments too, but I have one that's came up more recently. So, I think what Mr. DeChamps was just saying about, not wanting to ticket people forever, and I'm really glad to hear that, because that's something I'm concerned about too, is that it just, you're right, like that, a ticket can be a lot for someone, and we don't want to see that just going on forever. And you mentioned education, but I wanted to tie that back to something Lieutenant Brown was talking about earlier, which was the design of the intersection in Doyle and just how slow it is. Because I think, I hear you on education, but I think design is probably an even bigger issue there. And when you talked about Doyle, that the signal just takes so long, and you mentioned drivers wanting to, cut through there and whatnot because it takes so long. And my impression is like, that's why pedestrians are cutting through there also, right? It's a very long wait. And I personally have missed, right? Like I live on one side of Doyle. I often catch the R line on the other side of Doyle, by Charles Gate, and I have missed that bus so many times when I am just across the street, because that signal it's so long. And so, and I see people cutting through by Doyle all the time, but again, it's that wait. And it's especially hard when you see your bus go by you on the wrong side of the street. So, that was like kind of the immediate comment. I don't know if I have something that's less immediate. I don't know if you were on the same
I was
topic.
just gonna, so education and enforcement are definitely very important when we're talking about how to use the roadway, making sure that people are following the laws, right? But I think one thing that gets lost is, to Rachel's point, is the design of the roadway. We have engineering techniques, physical techniques to slow cars down, to narrow the roadway so that, crossings aren't so long for people. We have all of these techniques. It's just a matter of deploying it. Right.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that we're not missing the fact that roadway design is probably one of the most important aspects of slowing people down.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we haven't really talked a whole lot about in this particular commission.
Yeah.
And it's designed for all sorts of behaviors, right? Because they're designed for speed. What I was just talking about was like design for other behavior, like if you want people to cross in a certain way, making it so that
Making it
encourage
easier to cross.
easier, yeah. So all sorts of behaviors that you could use
Exactly.
for design.
Yeah, there are so many elements that impact what a driver is doing, what a pedestrian is doing, and a lot of that comes down to the physical design. So I think, at some point we should
Yeah,
talk more in depth about that.
that's a really
as a
great point.
plan.
I wonder if that could be follow-up to the road safety assessment that we'll be doing in April. I wonder if like some targeted, that's a question, I don't know what happens after an RSA, but some targeted, like, here's some spots we can try stuff out, could be.
Yeah, that's what's gonna come out of that. I think I see the road safety assessment kind of being the foundation, where, we have a lot of data that we'll go over as part of that, include crash data, and then it's, coming with all different alternatives, leaving everything on the table, and then kind of breaking that down and figuring, all right, what can we do right now? What is a good idea, but it might not work right now because of this, or it has a positive impact this way, but it might negatively impact, different stakeholder, like that'll all get identified. I did have one question in terms of when doing enforcement or having the speed feedback signage, were you able to notice, like a increase in compliance while being present?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. So that would probably require me having these guys move those items or move those message boards back to the same locations again, probably like in another month or so. Because the dates that these were there are listed on the top, but one or two of these were the first week in January, and I know I didn't have many people out there doing overtime. And that's the other thing I just want to mention. I know the Journal did a story on this. The only reason we've been able to do this is because we're paying overtime for this. There's only generally 2 officers who work in that district on any given time. They're not the busiest people in the city, but it's a steady drumbeat of call volume. And our call volume is actually up in those districts compared to last year. I just had our analysts do some stuff for me. And the types of calls that we're dealing with are growing. It used to be, we've been on 29 years, it used to be most of the calls over there were accidents and maybe alarm bells. You can get to an alarm bell in 2 minutes. The mental health call generally ties up both districts for 45 minutes to well over an hour. So we've had to really direct a lot of resources on this in the short term to try to have some visibility out there, but it's not sustainable at the city's level long term. And especially when the weather gets better, we're probably gonna have to put some of these resources back in other areas. So it would behoove us to maybe think about if there's 2 or 3 short-term things, maybe looking at like the hotspot problems, like I would say North Main and Rochambeau. You've had complaints. In fact, Tim Shea complaining told me that he got hit by a car there this last month by use of the slip lane, which is something we've talked about. So that might be something that's short-term that we can fix sooner than later. North Main and Doyle, I don't know, that's a long-term thing. You're not gonna fix that anytime soon. But if we could do some of those improvements sooner than later, and then maybe have these guys go out there and move those sleds back, and then we can do a compare and contrast. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm just curious to know, what that.
They only
what
hit
that
each
impact
spot
is.
just one time, this time around, right? So north and southbound at each of the locations, and then we probably go back and do the same thing.
We could probably utilize some more variable message boards. Maybe 2 each on either side, north and south of North Main Street, and in that corridor. We did try that for a while. The problem with the variable message boards is you get those individuals that see your speed pop up, and there's people that want to say, how fast can I go? Unfortunately, that is a factor. And so you'll see that in some of these pages that you have in front of you. But to go back on enforcement, again, I'm going to refer to DOT. We did have a meeting last week, and they would like us to concentrate more of our enforcement in this corridor. So we are going to try and do that for you. And hopefully we'll be drawing data as well from that to present to the lieutenant and present to you in future meetings.
Rachel has a question and then Martha and Jake.
It's actually a comment.
Okay,
but,
that's totally fine.
but it was a comment on the data, because, before our comment. So I was thinking about, someone saying something, forget who just said it, but, I was thinking a little bit about when the data were taken and if it was influenced by you being there. Because again, I've certainly heard from neighbors in the area that they have seen, that you're around, and they've seen more people getting tickets, and they feel, I mean, it's anecdotal, but they feel like people are driving slower because they know, this is happening now. So that could influence some of the data depending on the dates, and we have the dates on here.
Right.
But one comment I had about the data on here, and I'm still really kind of getting my head into this, because this is
Yeah.
a lot. But you said earlier, you know, that, most drivers are in this compliant or low risk category. But one of the measures on here that I'm really interested in is this 85% speed measure. Because when I read that, if I'm understanding it correctly, that's the 85th percentile of drivers. And so that means that 15% of drivers, and I can tell, like, there's like all data.
Yeah.
And so I see that.
Yeah, you're right. So 15% are
I think
outside of the.
15% of drivers are going at that speed or higher, is
Mhm.
my understanding of that. And so even if most drivers are going, good speed or not very much over, still if 15% of drivers are going some of these speeds, that's very concerning. And so some of these in here I'm seeing are like 40 miles per hour or
Mhm.
higher. And so if you're walking and that's like 3 and 20 cars, and you're probably passing, a few dozen of them, depending on what route you're walking, like you're still encountering a lot of drivers
Well,
going
I'm not
very
trying to
fast.
downplay
Yeah.
this, and I've said this
Yeah.
before, like, we know that there's a problem. There's been a problem on that road for decades, and I know that. I'm cognizant of that, and I've said I think the last meeting, some of the officers that are doing the LiDAR out there, they're finding cars in the 50, 55,
Yeah.
they're finding those people.
That's
you
part of
know.
the tricky thing, right? Because it's like, if you can get, the large majority of drivers who drive at a safe or nearly safe speed, those outliers are still such a big deal. That 15% is still
Yes.
huge, because that 15% is still the risk that could be hitting people. And so it's like, I don't know, I'm kind of thinking a lot, but it's
Yeah,
just an
no,
interesting
I-
puzzle here, because it's like, you can have most people be deterred by enforcement measures, but like most people might not be enough,
And the problem is though, I can't answer for the budget. I thought, one of my bosses was gonna be here, but we can't stay on this level of enforcement on North Main. And like he said, I have complaints at many other places in the east side similarly, and we haven't been given at this level of attention. We have because of some of the problems we had there, but I don't know how long we can sustain this. I mean, it's not just costing the city, there's revenue that comes back, right? The revenue from the fines, so we get a percentage of that, the state gets a percentage of it. So it's not like all that money is just completely thrown out, but there are other, and I've said this before, we can't police ourselves out of this problem.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Marissa,
So, concern, so first, I agree with you 100%. Because people will get angry that I'm getting fined all the time. My concern is with them getting ready to take down that bridge, we're gonna have more traffic coming through the east side. And now our neighborhood streets are gonna become dangerous because people know, well, North Main Street's being heavily monitored. So they're gonna be speeding through the streets, and we gotta worry about our kids that are going to the park or whatever. So that's my big concern. That's why I said, what is it that we need to do? But I think education is key, and markers that we can put up, maybe move the crosswalk from right next to the intersection down some, because that down where Doyle Avenue is, it's very wide and open. So if we kind of moved it away from where the lights are, move it down some more, and then put the lighting, put the signs up so people know, maybe some flashes, something that we can put into place now, because there's a lot of people are gonna wanna walk down to the city and things of that nature.
Yeah.
But my concern with doing heavy, ticketing and, making the roads smaller, people are gonna be sitting in traffic longer. They're definitely gonna blame the representatives, and the quality of life will go down all the way around. And I'm not saying that people walking, that's dangerous, being hit, but are there other alternatives? Could we add a Camp Street bus line? Where people can go up to camp, where it's less dangerous, you can walk up to camp to catch the bus, and you don't have to worry about walking across, because right now, with what's going on the highway, I don't know that we should make it any slower, because then people are gonna be angrier, they're already angry. And we're gonna have, I think, more issues on North Main Street, so. But I wanna make it safer. I'm not a walker, but I do wanna make it safe for anybody that's down there, but is this an alternative? Like maybe a Camp Street line.
Yeah, 'cause there was a Camp Street bus line, right?
There was, absolutely.
We have exactly 5 riders.
40?
exactly what riders think, okay, cool.
Did it go all the way along though?
It went from downtown up to the east side of Tamarian Hospital.
Okay.
But did it like cut down Doyle? And kind of
It
do
cut
a
down
little-
a little bit, but right, the thing is, it had such low frequency because it's stuck, it's right between the 1 and the R that we just, it didn't make sense with our resources to keep running the route.
Okay, I feel that's helpful. Jamie, did you have your hand up before, or were you just scratching?
Yeah.
Okay, Jamie and Nate.
I don't think we can solve the pedestrian safety problem without addressing speed. And like, I hear your point, but I think moving the pedestrians out of the corridor and kind of abandoning Main Street to just being a highway and accepting that is not really gonna be the solution. You know, and I'm looking at these reports and, you know, particularly the like 879 northbound, like the compliant vehicles to this green line, it's like almost nobody who's coming speed, right? So like the speed limit's 25. As Rachel pointed out, we have stretches where, you know, 15% of cars are going
Which-
40.
Which one's 879? Do you know is that over by that green line? Officer, please?
879 would be just passing over those German.
Yeah.
German motor.
So that's that location that we've talked about. It's a
Yeah.
long stretch that's uninterrupted.
Oh, that's right,
Absolutely, yeah, I think that's one
On
of
both
those
sides.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I think your point is right, design is the way out of it, right? But that's not a short-term proposition. Like, there's some interventions we can start making. But to turn the road into something that doesn't look like a highway is going to take more time. I share concerns that have been expressed about ticketing people to death, and I appreciate the financial hardship that comes along with hefty fines. There's also a financial hardship that comes along with being hit by a car, loss of income, loss of life, which may be a breadwinner for a family, medical bills. But, you know, we're trying to balance sort of negative consequences here. So like, while I don't think ticketing alone is going to solve this, I think for the moment, when that's kind of all we have, you know, there's value to it. And the education versus enforcement thing as well, like, it is important. I think realistically, there's not a lot of, I don't think we're gonna reach enough drivers through signs and flyers and ad campaigns and things to like really change this. Where I'm going with this is I'm wondering if we can kind of like find a nexus between some of these concepts. You know, Sue and I had a conversation last week about speed cameras, which currently under state law, or my understanding is they're only permitted within a 1/4 mile radius of a school, right within a school zone. You know, is there a possibility of asking the state legislature for like a time limited carve out that would allow us to put automated enforcement just until we can address some of the road design stuff, like for a year? You know, the mayor is talking about noise cameras and things like that and going to the state legislature for that as a quality of life issue. I mean, this is every bit as much, and I think more so, a quality of life issue. Can we, as a body, as the city council, as the mayor, would RIDOT support something like that? Maybe like a short-term, just speed cameras with like maybe low fines, so that we're not charging people, like, you know, if it's automated, and you can do high volume ticketing. The fine can be $10, like make it revenue neutral, just charge whatever it costs to mail somebody a ticket. Like, so that we're not burdening people financially, but just kind of creating sort of a toll that goes along with speeding. I think there are approaches like this that are kind of compromises between the kind of upsides that we're trying to achieve and the downsides we're trying to avoid. Like, short of that, can we use speed cameras within current state law? Just to send warnings. You know, you were reported at the speed on North Main Street. Here's like an education opportunity with no fine. I mean, I realize there's a cost to doing that, but I'm trying to think creatively here about how we can kind of reach.
If I may,
Yeah,
I agree. I agree that the fine there should be some type of legislature like they did for seatbelts. They reduced the fine from 86 to 41. It's still an educational process. It's still a fine. You're still being stopped. You're still being hit with pocketbook. But at the same time, it doesn't affect your driver's license or your insurance, which another fine, another moving violation will. Okay, so yes, I agree with that. But that's above us right now, because that's at the legislative. And are they going, who's gonna sponsor the bill? Who's gonna back it? are they gonna pass it? Is it gonna go by both houses? That seems like a very long term to me. And what I'm looking for is something here and now.
I think I'm proposing, you know, if we could kind of come around to some agreement on like hypothetically, this would be something we'd support. If we can find a couple sponsors who would like support this as an emergency intervention. Maybe it could pass this session, you know, that's no guarantee, but. I don't know how the people in general on this body feel about that. Again, not as a revenue generator, as a way to just modify driver behavior.
No, I think it's a good idea, and I like his point about the seatbelts. He's right. I have actually forgotten that the seatbelt liners went down considerably.
Any other thoughts to answer Jamie's question?
I was just
Around the
gonna
table,
say
and then we'll go to-
it makes sense to do this. We're talking about, paying a lot of money in overtime and our officers are getting tired. We just don't have the capacity. Why not try to do something else? Yeah. Why not try?
Especially for that location. Because that location, we've talked about that, and we all know it's a long straightaway.
Yeah.
It's uninterrupted. If you're coming south, that's the southbound, well, it doesn't matter.
Southbound.
If you don't get the light at Rochambeau, it's a long stretch.
At most a mile, yeah.
Yeah, but there's nothing. And, like, we have competing needs. I'd still like to have people out there and have some visibility, but summer's coming. Some of the assets that we're using right now came from India Point. It came from the area down by the bridge. Like, we have other things that we're gonna have to deal with in another month.
Thank you for waiting until after the Ward 1 councilman left to say that we took resources from the point.
We've had that conversation. He knows it's, he knows.
Oh,
Yeah, I think-
wait, Nate.
I think
said
as
you
long,
could go into
as long as
this.
it's temporary, because, I mean. As a long-term solution, I'm not sure that's the greatest solution either. I mean,
Just to buy some
you know,
time.
buy some time so we can put some physical impediments here to slow traffic down, but yeah. I don't know. That can be done without changing legislation. I think you will have to. Even if it's just warnings, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Totally good question, but-
So that could be, I can ask from above the solicitors about.
And we could maybe follow those as two parallel channels, like investigate, like. Is it realistic to get something through the legislature in short term as an emergency measure, and failing that, can we do warnings, or in the meantime, can we do warnings? Sean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't know if like.
How quickly can we build a school on North Main Street?
Yeah.
There you go.
MLK Elementary School is 0.26 miles, it is 53 feet too far away from North Main Street.
That's, it's something. Okay.
But-
let's bring this-
Well, there used to be.
If it takes that
Isn't there
lot,
still
that's
school on,
15, does that,
Yeah, I don't know.
But the first one says any school, right? So I don't know how that's interpreted, maybe we can get a legal. opinion.
Yeah.
They asked if it's true.
Something.
No, it's not.
Okay, let's just keep talking at a time, actually, just for the record. So you were saying something and then we'll pop back.
But I was just saying that I don't believe this is school on Island. I think it's been going for a while.
It's not there, yeah.
Okay.
I'm really not sure what I think about what you said, about, because I, taking a legislative approach for something short term, like I don't know that that's the way, to do it, and I also know, like that we're kind of far into the session, like even if it's technically not too late, it might, in terms of procedures, be too late, but looking into the things like the exceptions of its education seems worth it, but all of this is kind of that not sure, complicated thing, like everything we're dealing with is, we have ideal ways to deal with this, and then we're figuring out what to do short term, and it's tricky.
But again, I think we can pursue those in parallel, right? Like we can investigate like educational warnings, the speed camera, while we're asking legislators, could you support this and could you get it through this session, right? So I don't know, like I don't think it's an either or.
And haven't there been, concerns about different uses of cameras in the city recently, so I got, I want to understand.
Well,
why
like, in some of those,
like,
like saying like fines $10, could you live with this for 9 months, I mean, like make it as palatable as possible.
I think the challenge,
Oh, no, good. Peter and then Mr. English, yeah.
I think, yeah, I'm not sure I know exactly what I think about
Yeah.
the idea either, but I get it. But I think also, yeah, the fine is lower. And so for many people, they just don't, they're not that worried about it, and they know it's not a moving violation, and they know it doesn't count against their insurance. It may, like, where is that
But if
sweet
it costs
spot?
them $10 a
Where-
day to speed in North Main Street, after a couple weeks, they're gonna be like, okay, let's slow down.
I'm thinking back to, before there was on-street parking and people had nowhere to park. And I would, come down my street and I happen to have a driveway, which is great. Like, I would just see orange tickets up and down the street, because many people didn't have a great option before they instituted the on-street thing. And so, I just don't know how to get to that place, but I also understand that, that it takes resources to have officers there. I mean, I also will say it's not fun to be pulled over. No one likes that, right? Because you say, oh no. And so getting pulled over and being reminded that you're going over the speed limit is in and of itself an experience that I think will help. In other words, in terms of avoiding the fines, the violations, so warnings that way seems to me to be more meaningful than like you have the meaning of the experience, and I'm late for work and this is terrible, but you don't have the fine that you can't afford to pay. But I understand,
all of these vehicles that are yellow or orange, that's a number.
Yeah, well, the yellow is low risk. That's a big piece of that, which I think is meaningful, right? Because like, that's a much smaller amount over. I mean, I just think it's meaningful data. I mean, how many miles per hour is the yellow over?
Up to 10.
Oh, up to 10, okay.
But so 35 versus 25, like you have pretty good data on like pedestrians, byways and drivers.
Right.
So it's
In that range, it's not very good for pedestrians.
Yeah.
Right.
Anything 30 or above.
But kind of high.
You get a very serious accident or fatality.
Yes.
If it's a pedestrian vehicle.
Mr. English has had his hand up for quite some time now.
So first, you two, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome work, you found her. Thank you. Also, I saw you that night, didn't realize. It was my brother. So again, thank you. That said, the tickets, I get it, hurts everybody. But $25,000 to come up within a day is a lot. And I had no choice.
Yeah.
No one can take that away. I do believe in education. It said at the last meeting, I'll say it in every other meeting, our kids are not realizing that they're driving a damn machine gun. They hit a bus stop with 12 people, they just killed everybody, forget about it. I was told that when I was a kid. Watch out with how you drive, because you're gonna kill people straight up. If we show them education and show them awareness to all the social media that we've got, which would be semi-minuscule, give them a fine, tell them that they're gonna get their credit against their insurance unless they go to a class. That gives them an option to get out. But if they don't and they minimize it, they should get the fine and they should get it against their insurance. Have I broken the law on speed? Absolutely. And if I got pulled over, I would yell at him. That's my fault. He's doing his job. How many people did you save today? How many people did you save last year? How many people don't even realize you saved? So the reality is they're doing their job. I sit there and worry about how you hurt people's feelings. How many people did you bury last year? So the reality is let's not worry about how taxpayers will look at it. If you sit there and you give them an out, you say, hey, I gave you an out. You want to not pay the fine? You don't want to go to the class, then you get the fine. If you do go to the class, you not only not get the fine, but it doesn't go on your record. That coupled with the social media going straight across everywhere would actually reduce it. If he sat there and talked about how many people he had go knock on their doors to their sons, their daughters, their mothers, their fathers, whoever got hit, how many have been told pass away? A little more than one, actually. My cousin, Paul Fitzgerald, he was in the police department, and he started a program in Fox Point under Mayor Yancey's administration And they went door to door and they brought it all down to being information, bringing it down to the public, knocking on doors, doing the bicycle life during the movement. That changed. If you knew what I knew about Fox Point, you wouldn't want to walk down there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Forget about 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a bad, bad place. Now, I noticed on the reports, I skimmed through it pretty good, I think. I noticed at 7 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 7 in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4, and 7 to 8 was one of the worst areas of traffic. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
So if you sat there and just focused on those three, you would reduce it. But then I would turn around to the state police, because that's a state road. And I'd say, where's the money for my men to be on that road? Because I haven't seen one state trooper. I have seen these guys on there multiple times, and I don't know if they know it, but I wait for them every time I see them. I haven't seen one cop, one state trooper at all on that road, and if they're not on it, why ain't they paying them? Because we shouldn't have to worry about our local guys doing a job on North Main Street instead of in the community. When that's a state road, they shouldn't be on North Main Street if that's the case. If everybody's arguing, it's not their problem because it's not. I see them doing a lot more work than the other guys. So again, I go back with questioning the Rhode Island State Police, question with social media. I think that's a great avenue. Show them the pictures of all these people getting hit. Show them the court hearings that are going on. Do you really want to lose your license or lose your timing at work because you're going to court every day? Why? Because you didn't get a $5 ticket last month, but you killed someone this month, so you're dealing with a lot bigger of a problem. People don't get in accidents at a certain amount of speeds that change people's lives. Pull up a bike going, an electric bike going 25 miles an hour. I could have walked for 6 months. That was me not hitting nothing. Imagine if I got hit by a car at 35, it would be sudden impact. At least when I flew, I flew. You can't get hit by a car, whether you're going 10 miles an hour over that 25, or 50 miles or 80 miles. You're changing someone's life. And a lot of those people, if you notice, especially over the Antoil, are older people. You hit them, that's a death sentence half the time. So for us to sit there and argue about how people feel, I think it's kind of being not productive in the reasons why you're at the stadium. It should be, how do you stop traffic going so fast? And how do you educate both the young people and the old people that look like they're rushing to work? They got pulled over. Do you think they'd be late? I think so. And if you do it enough times, I don't see it going down too much, but I did see it go sideways. Am I right? So it was like 7 o'clock Monday through Friday, and then it kind of went towards the weekends because you've been into the presence on North Main Street. So, and again, I'm looking at the same data that you are. I kind of looked at it pretty well. I wrote through the whole thing. To me, I don't think it takes a brain scientist to know that social media is at our hands. It doesn't cost much more other than a recording, and maybe they're all really salary. I think we could do that, throw it on Facebook and schedule it. You don't have to think about it again. Throw it on noontime, 3 o'clock in the afternoon and 7 in the morning. And you'll see about many millions of people have visited it. Whether it's on the city's site, the city council site, or even your own personal site, enough people will attract you. But that's my two cents.
Thank you. Rachel, you had a comment and then Marissa's hand is up.
Sure, yeah. But Mike, I really appreciate your comment about the cost that you were making right when you started out about, you know, the cost of the ticket versus the cost when someone actually gets hit. I think that really you know, just really stood out to me. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
The thing that I was kind of reflecting on was this short-term versus long-term piece of our work. And I feel this, you know, intense short-term need too. So it's like, I'm glad that we're trying to do what we can short-term. And I think we all really want to be doing something right away. But I also hear this conversation. I feel like this conversation is one really big example of why we need a long-term solution and why that's probably road design, you know, because we're doing all of these short-term things and none of them are ideal. You know, and we can make all of these little impacts and we should, I think we all feel it, like, none of us wanna have, more deaths on North Main Street. But, you know, we can't keep doing the ticketing forever, we can't, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
like none of these things are really going. Either one, they're not sustainable, but two, they're not gonna address the full problem, so, you know, I think. All of this, we keep talking around what we have control over right now, but. I feel like this whole meeting today, or at least this section of it, is just kind of screaming, we need a design solution. For the street,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Marissa had her hand up first.
Sorry.
And then.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
But you're gonna start working on that in April, you said, right?
Right, the safety assessment.
Okay,
is
so
kind
what's
of-
the timeline look like?
When the safety assessment be conducted, typically, you know, there's a turnaround of a few weeks to get the report in, you know, we review it, and, you know, and that has all, you know, various recommendations at different levels, and that includes engineering, that includes the other E's, enforcement, education, things like that. And then, you know, it's how things get implemented from there, whether it's through, you know, if it's right out owned, through, you know, maintenance work orders, some of the lower hanging fruit, up to projects that are in the, you know, SIP, transportation improvement program to be implemented. You know, whenever
So what
that happens
would
here.
you look at, like maybe a minimum of a year?
For longer term,
Yeah,
most likely, I think, based on getting the funding and where that ends up in the tip, that's kind of where it is at. I mean, the good news is there's a project in the tip that can hopefully address, you know, some of these issues.
there's already a project.
There's
Okay.
already
Is
funding identified.
Funding identified, all those things, so I think
You say
we're
the-
moving in that right
The
direction.
tip is the transportation improvement plan for the state. Is there anything that gets like write-off funding has to be in the tip or like, or it's not getting money?
And that's like an annual.
It's like a long, is it like a 5-year thing, but then things move around this year, 10
Every
years?
10 years.
It's a 10-year.
4 years and then 6 years. In the undefined period. The first 4 years.
Okay, Marissa?
So I had a couple questions. One was, and they kind of summed it up, the long term, how long does it take? What are we looking at?
For like design?
For redesign of streets, which I think, again, is gonna be a couple of years out. So that's why the short term has to happen, if you want safety now. But again, I'm gonna reiterate, my concern is people finding alternate routes to a community. The community I'm in, that I bought a house in because it's a community, we have to remember, it's kind of like buying a house next to a park and then complaining there's kids playing in the park. North Main Street's a highway, right? So I'm not saying it can't be safe, it is, but my concern is if you're doing heavy cameras, you're doing heavy tickets, then all the side streets become dangerous. And they can't monitor all the side streets, they can't do that, that's unrealistic for anyone to do. So that's what we need to keep, that's what I'm here to make sure that's kept at the forefront too, because now you're running into kids having to be hit. I don't want anybody hit. I don't want anyone, that's why I said move the stop sign, move the crosswalks away from the actual intersection that on Doyle and North Main. That's dangerous. That whole intersection is dangerous for people driving. It's dangerous. And to get the bus stops closer together so people aren't trying to walk all the way down the street or go into dangerous situations trying to cross the street to get to a bus stop that's right there at an intersection where people are turning left to turn right, whether it's red or it's green. But that's my concern as somebody in the community. I live up in that community and I can just see people saying, you know what? The bridge isn't there to go 195 east. They're gonna be cutting through downtown, through the east side to go the other way through Pawtucket or over the Red Bridge to get to the east, to get over to East Providence. And that's gonna make our neighborhoods dangerous. And summer's coming up, so kids are gonna be out. People are gonna be more out there in the community than crossing North Main Street.
Yeah, so thank you for that, yeah, 1 second. I really appreciate that, and I think also two things. I'm hearing particularly around like unintended consequences, and I know that Nate and I have talked about this a while back about some of the speed humps too, because I love speed humps, I was gonna say, but also we see, like, maybe we've seen, like, do people then just go, like, on the other streets just as fast? So like, let's think through what our unintended consequences are for any actions we take. Doesn't mean we don't take actions, we definitely need to take actions. And I also do want to say again that the speed limit is 25, it's not a highway, and that people should be going 25. So like, and I was just chatting with former councilman Wood from Ward 2, and he was sharing that, and I can say, but he said this publicly, so I feel okay about it, but like, this was the same, there was a similar conversation with Blackstone, which is a different, very different road, but like, when it was 2 lanes, it went down to 1, so they could put in additional infrastructure, and so people were calling and be like, but now I can't speed and pass. And he was like, you should have been doing that before. Stop, it's 25. So it's the same, like, we should watch for additional volume. And Mr. Badley brought up the same concern about the additional volume because of the bridge, and he couldn't be here tonight. So we'll add his chorus to that. But he is worried about additional, has also shared that concern about with the bridge debacle. We'll see more traffic. And so like thinking about what that looks like and how we deal with it. And then Rachel had a comment, so I just wanted to say this is Rachel, and then it looks like you were about to say something.
So I guess one thing I'm thinking about is the side streets too, and you mentioned, you know, concern that the people cut through the side streets. And it's my experience, you know, walking around a lot in the neighborhoods, like I live on Doyle, so I walk on camp, I walk on Doyle a whole bunch, right? And so I get that this is anecdotal, but I'm also living there and walking there every day. And in my experience, people are already speeding on the side streets, and certainly speeding on camp, but even more so, people speed going up the hill. And one thing, you know, coming into this group, it's like when we talk about North Main Street, I think of all those side streets as being part of North Main Street, because I think a lot of the speed is because they're coming from North Main Street and they're going up, they like think they can keep driving that fast. And Doyle, people use to cut through from North Main all the time. So the speeding is usually when they're going up rather than down, because they're coming from where it's fast and they think that they can. And so like one thing is, you know, when we talk about how many pedestrian fatalities we've had recently, you know, we had someone who was killed at Doyle and Camp. Yeah. And I think of that as a North Main Street fatality.
Because it could have been speeding up from.
Yeah, because my understanding is that she was coming from North Main Street and she was going up, and again, just walking on all of those side streets, going anywhere in these little areas, even streets that are remarkably narrow, people just speed right up every one of them.
Because
So
they're just going 50 on North Main, right?
yeah, because they're going fast on North Main and they're coming off, and I don't know where everyone's going, because it feels like they're cutting through. You know, it doesn't seem like it's necessarily residents, at least not residents like right in Mount Hope. But they're going somewhere, whether they're going somewhere else on the east side or cutting through the east side, I don't know. But we already have so much speeding in this area, you know, especially that first block between North Main and Camp, kind of getting up that hill. So, you know, I guess for anything that we do, we should be thinking about unintended consequences and whether we might redirect people. But I guess I'm just worried that we already have speeding on all the side streets too. So it's already an issue. With things like getting to the park, you know, we talked about the park, getting up cyclists, for example, people speed up, cyclists, people speed up Doyle, they speed up every one of those little streets that they're allowed, every one of the streets that they're allowed to go up on, but if any are one way that probably speed comes too, so.
But the traffic calming that we want to see on North Main may actually spill onto the side streets where people were just going 25 on North Main, so they're going to turn out the Rochambeau and still be going 25, you know? I don't have data on that, but like people who study this more than I do might have thoughts on how traffic calming on a major arterial road impacts things adjacent to the corridor.
I don't think
We
it's,
do have a traffic engineer.
I don't think it's a clear way to predict it. I guess you really just need to
Mhm.
to account for those things. So, I mean, you know, maybe, you know, if that's a concern, maybe some of these improvements can be temporary. We can measure
We
the
can try
effect
out
on
some things.
some of the parallel streets. To get an idea. Like if you put a bump out in, put it like
Put the
stanchions first.
Yeah, yeah.
Whatever, you know, so. Before you actually put a curve in, it depends on the measure, you know.
And just capacity wise, you know, like, we're talking about enforcement, we're already doing enforcement on North Main, and I would say, okay, and also every single side street. All along North Main, like.
Well,
I mean,
if you
it's just-
saw my 301 complaints, they are every single side street.
Yeah, all the side streets get a lot.
Every street in the city has
Street
complaints.
ones, yeah. Except for, 6, because it's only one block, 6 doesn't get as many, I feel like, anyway, do you have a question? Okay, oh, sir. If no one else around, okay, do you wanna, and can you say, oh, wait, you already said your name for the record,
Yes,
so we need to know you, yeah.
A couple of questions, one regarding the data, so, I'm not sure. I don't know, if one of you two can maybe answer it, under mode. I'm unclear on what some of those mean. So speed limit sign, I feel like is very clear, but. What is daily schedule, I mean, display off is very clear.
Oh, so what, I think that's a setting of the machine, you can probably.
That's exactly what it is. It's a setting on the machine. These machines are, we can charge them, they have batteries in them, but we also have solar panels. So obviously they work off the sun and the atmosphere and everything that's going on. So when you see daily schedule, that means that they're turned on at a certain time in the morning and they're turned off at a certain time in the at night. According to All Traffic Solutions, once the machine is off, it is not collecting data. So that is one of the downfalls, but in order to keep these machines out on the road, collecting the data that we truly need or that we would like, we have to try and save the batteries, because if not, we'll be moving these machines like within 3 days, 3 to 4 days each, and that's another cost.
And is display off, just like when it's not giving you a message?
Display off, there were times when we did have it on North Main Street, where the display was off, but the machine was still gathering that.
That's what we talked about.
Yeah, we talked
I
about
asked
that.
them to do that, to try
Yeah.
to get people to think that the machine wasn't working.
Yeah, so they weren't like modulating their behavior. Do you wanna, Katie has another question, yeah.
Or did you wanna follow up?
Oh, I didn't see that you were, sorry about that.
The display off, we're looking into possibly purchasing additional data collecting speed sleds, and they're very small, they're pole mounted,
Oh,
and they're in Spiegel, so you get more of that raw data that you're looking for, so. Motorists don't know that they're being monitored. So we've been asked to kind of get a quote for that,
Okay.
so that may be an additional resource that we may be able to use in the future for the city for collecting the raw data that we may need to make an educated decision on.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, just so that you have more to talk about.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, great, oh. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for the clarification, really appreciate that. The next thing, that I wanted to kind of ask about is the shorter term solutions versus longer term. I agree with everyone, at the table, we just talked about how longer term solutions are important, very key, especially as it relates to like the infrastructure, surrounding the North Main Street, right? Do we put speed bumps? Do we make the road narrower, et cetera? For a shorter term solution, have we considered like literally just paint? Painting, instead of actually putting concrete, right, you paint kind of buffers around, like striped buffers around, the intersections, or even the slow down, please, like actually on the actual like street, the road itself. Again, it's not infrastructure, that's not necessarily a long-term solution, but maybe for the shorter term, it's easy to, I don't know, maybe it's easy to buy a bucket of paint and just go to town. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Val?
Yeah, if I could see this on the first page from the report back on the screen again, please. I have a question about the data as well.
The very first page?
Yeah. I share, the bias that I heard from Rachel and Jess that infrastructure, that changing common street is the way to go. And that the enforcement measures that are being taken, we appreciate that. But enforcement is not gonna be the solution on things, that's my bias. But as I'm looking at the data, and I see that a medium risk is speed limit plus 10, which is 35 miles an hour. I'm taking into account what I've heard a little bit about at the table, which is the NTSB data on survivability for a foot traveler like myself, and a person wanting to bus like myself. And the survivability data has changed, and I don't know if your contractor, All Traffic Solutions, has realized that the profile of the vehicle matters in my survivability tremendously. So your low profile vehicle that strikes me is gonna be survivable, will crash, and an F-150 pickup truck that hits me is not gonna be survivable, crash at the same speed. And there's a little bit more about that and reflected in the NTSB data or rating systems that was alluded to as the conversation went on, that I hope that this group will take a deep dive on. Because in my view, on North Main, the medium risk and the high risk can result in fatalities, not just the high risk. And this data that you guys are crunching numbers, the picture driven, I love that. But the data driven part of this could be obscured when you're not taking into consideration vehicle height and the bright light and all of this, the bright spot and all of this is that Congressman Magaziner signed a letter with Jenny Raskin in Congress last year to ask that the rating system on new cars starts to reflect that a car cannot get a 4 or 5 star rating if it is dangerous to people outside of the vehicle. So that consumers who are buying cars can start to realize that a very high profile vehicle is extremely dangerous to the foot traveler. And that hopefully will help law enforcement. Okay, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Val, I appreciate that. Mr. English, and then does anybody else have public comment after that?
Trying to be really quick. First, the only one that can actually think about the Senate, you know, how is the governor until next session. You can actually make an emergency order, put a camera on what I think you can do it. The other thing is I threw out something many moons ago. Given my age, I was running for Senate in '92, and one of the things that I believe, and I still believe, if you're on the side road, whatever your speeding ticket is, you should double. Just like you're at a commercial site, and you see tickets, signs, your ticket will double. So should you if you're going on the side streets or near the plots, automatically double. And that way people stop realizing you just don't speed on side streets. Because if you don't get people in the pocket, I tell you, you're gonna keep on doing it. If nobody sees the consequences, life just keeps on going on the way they want to do it. Until people have held up to accountability is when you're gonna get some results. And again, I've seen lots of kids, some in front of my own street. I lived on Nesbitt Street, now dead houses, right, Nesbitt Street. Over there where Allen Avenue, Benefit Street.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
Totally dead street.
Yeah.
Watch people die in front of me just by a cop flying down the street because they thought they mother and father buy the Jaguar or their BMW again and again and again. And they didn't have to respond to it. If you have bigger tickets, bigger consequences. And the other thing that I'd be shooting for, which isn't really you guys, but I think insurance people, anytime you get a car, you should have $50,000 coverage. Because right now, you only need 20,000. Try to bury someone with 20,000. Sometimes it's pretty hot just to buy a plot instead of buying. So that out there, to me, I think it shouldn't be worried about the person who's creating the crime more than the person who has to deal with it. The victims are always seem to be thrown to the side because we might hurt the feelings of the offenders. And I don't get why, but that's it. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments before we wrap? Okay, I'm also thinking a lot about, so Jess and I got to meet Secretary Buttigieg yesterday, which was very exciting. But in his remarks, he said something like, when you do this kind of work, and he was really focused on a lot of the things we're talking about with safety at one point, but like, we both have to be patient, understanding city processes, and also have absolutely no patience. And it's like, that's, I feel like, the tension we have here, but we need to do a bunch of stuff soon. And also, some of the stuff's gonna take a long time, like the RIPTA stuff. So I'm excited for us to be doing that in this task force. Like, let's have no patience, get a little bit done, and then also have a little bit of patience so we can get to some of these bigger solutions. And, before we close, I do need to put this in the record. Claire and Rachel reminded me, can I please have someone, have a motion to make this, exhibit 2?
Motion to make this exhibit 2.
Excellent. Okay, great. So moved and seconded, all in favor? Excellent. Before, when we were doing the updates since last meeting, I did mention the RSA, Sean, so, folks should have that in their inboxes, in their calendars, if you wanted to add anything.
You gave it the date and everything, it'll be the 10th, I think there's a
Yeah.
pre-meeting on the 9th and then a debrief right after that, so.
Are we walking the whole road? Is that what the plan is? Okay.
Yeah, I think the goal is to do that in whatever time that it takes, to do that. If there's areas where it's like, yeah, we don't need to look at this, which I doubt, we can certainly, sometimes we leave it up to consultants too, but yeah, the goal is to cover the total limits.
And I can plan to send a reminder out to folks, beforehand.
Quick question, I don't know what department handles this, but the lighting that he was talking about, the officer was talking about, from Rochambeau, right up, past the whole graveyard, it's like pitched up
Yeah.
and like pitched up. Who?
That's the property.
Immediate?
Yeah, we talked about lighting last meeting a bit, so I'll forward. What, oh, 2 meetings ago, we talked about it recently, and I think it was the one that you had to miss, so I can follow up with you, and then Kyle, who left, he and I met with public property. Do you know Kyle? I feel like he was my cousin. He is. Very favorite person. Okay, Kyle and I met with public property to talk, because public property owns those lights. And so, we talked with them about the options of both like turning them up, which they've done, but also what would it look like to add more lights in certain areas? And that's different whether or not there are poles versus no poles and who owns which poles where. But Kyle, who's amazing, and you know that, is helping me follow up with public property about how we get more like. But if that's a particular issue, and Jamie did some really cool, I'll make sure you see this, drone footage and stuff to see like where the dark spots were and where some of the safety areas. Follow up on that. But I'll be certain.
His drone footage, it shouldn't be looking at cameras there, it should be looking at right when the Fox department one is at the meeting. If you throw lights in the meeting and throw it on.
Oh, yeah, parts of the median, but there's no, yeah, you need solar.
You can,
There's
you can
no
light up
power.
much better, that's that dead zone that everybody can see. You light that up and you throw it on slowly, most of the traffic, by the time the sun goes down. And people stop, it's around 11 o'clock midnight, maybe it's all contractors, for the most, they're also strangers, going through them. But that solar would cover that. And if it shuts off around 11 o'clock, it turns on about 5. Now you get the light from yesterday's energy, still to light up the street before we get to work.
Yeah, no, thank you, Brady, yeah. Claire.
And just one point, you can watch it on YouTube, all our meetings are all on YouTube.
Oh,
So you can go back at the meeting and.
And that's why I kind of realized what he was doing, and benefits some of those extra lights in the meeting.
It's really amazing. It was like drones and then brought like a light camera and like went out and measured. It was like.
Yeah, I walked every property.
Not. They caught an accident in progress. It was like.
We don't understand, we'll just get you down.
Yeah, we have Jacob.
Well, I need to go back to the spot check and see how much bread it is.
Yeah, I need a motion to adjourn, please.
Oh, sorry.
Seconded, and all in favor? Yay. Very good. No, please, run, yeah. Thanks, everybody. I can one right.
If I could, yeah. I was talking. No. Like the friendly way to say this, like I was chatting with